Well, welcome to another edition of Family Matters. Thank you to everyone who's been responding to the previous guests we've had with questions and thoughts. And this week is going to be no different. I've got a very exciting story to tell. Well, not me. I have a wonderful guest who's going to tell you about some remarkable work happening through something called the Dignity Freedom Network, sometimes just known as DFN. And my guest is Kate. So, Kate, you're the CEO of DFN. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Simon. Great to be with you this morning.
Tell viewers, what is the Dignity Freedom Network? Tell us about the work that you lead.
So Dignity Freedom Network has been around for around 10 years in New Zealand, but we've been working on the ground in India now for about 50 years. And so it's a nationally led and run organisation working with the poorest of the poor. So the Dalits, or those who were formerly known as the untouchables, and empowering them, letting them know they're created in the image of God, they do have value and worth, and then providing them with holistic care, education, healthcare, economic empowerment, and just empowering them to come out of their situation and letting them know that there are people that care about their plight.
In itself, that's actually quite remarkable and huge. So let's start at the beginning. How did you start this? What was the catalyst that drew you into this act of service?
I think it really began when I was about 6, and I was brought up in a non-Christian home. But I remember walking in one day and my dad was watching the television, and there was some article on that was about untouchability in India. And it just appalled my senses. And even though I'm from a non-Christian background, I think in our culture, we really have a Judeo-Christian worldview that permeates everything that we do. And so we have this intrinsic understanding of the value of a person. And so to hear, even at such a young age, of people being told that they were untouchable, it really violated my senses. It was years and years and years later, when I'd been involved in missions for quite some time, and I got the opportunity to go to India, and I saw untouchability firsthand. And again, it just deeply impacted me to think these people are told that they have no value, that they have no worth, that they were created as less than human. And I guess I just really wanted to make a difference in that space. It really was something that impacted my heart.
Some of our viewers and listeners, and actually to a degree myself, won't fully comprehend that untouchable aspect. Are you able to tease that out and explain it a little bit to people? Because I assume this is part of that caste system that we hear about. And I suppose the second question around that is, are they literally, this group of people, untouchable? Are they not to be touched or engaged in any way? And then how do they reach this stage? Yeah, just talk us through how this works, because it's quite foreign to a New Zealander for sure.
It is, and they're huge, huge questions. So I'll do my best to unpack it. So as I said, here in New Zealand, we have basically a worldview that is shaped by a Judeo-Christian understanding of equality and egalitarianism. But in India, the caste system is what determines what a person's status is in life. And so you're born in your caste, you marry within your caste, you work within your caste, you die in your caste, and you can't move from one caste to another. And so just very, very broadly, there's 4 main castes, and I won't unpack all of that at the moment. Then basically the understanding is that then comes the animals. First and foremost are cows, which they are deemed to be gods. But then under them come another whole mass of people, and these people are basically told from the time that they're born that they are untouchable, that they fall outside the caste system. They've taken on the name Dalit for themselves, and the word Dalit means crushed, oppressed and broken. And they've taken that name on because they believe that epitomizes who they are. And so from a very, very early age, these children are basically taught that they have less value than other children, that they don't have the same rights as other children. You'll hear of honour killings to do with marriages where there's people who fall in love between different castes, and it's just a whole different understanding of what shapes the world, and it really is very, very foreign to us, as you've already said. If you could help me unpack that a bit more, ask another couple of questions and I'll address them.
Happy to. So I mean, I'd always thought, again, I'm no expert in this space, which is why we're having this chat today. So those who are Dalit, as they call themselves, or the untouchables, they're not even within the caste system. I mean, that in itself is fairly profound, that you're not just the lowest of the caste system, you're not even worthy of being in it. So they must face quite a number of indignities. I assume the law is that they are to be treated equally, but probably not applied in practice. Would that be a fair comment?
Absolutely. So the law would definitely side with the Dalit people. And in fact, there's a lot of provisions made for them. For example, university places, working in government positions, and that kind of thing. But most of these people aren't able to gain the education to avail themselves of these provisions that have been made for them. And one of the things that we do is advocate in this space, work with these people, introduce them to the government initiatives that are in place. And so it's a sustainability that we can, have with the organisation in country where the government has made provisions, and then we can connect these people with them. But Simon, I think one of the other things that is just so profound is the number of people. So at this stage, we believe there's around 250 million Dalit people. So if you think of the population of New Zealand, that's just an astonishing, unbelievable number.
That's
And one of the
phenomenal.
reasons why we don't know how many there are, many of them don't even have birth papers. And so there is no registration that they even exist. So when it comes to elections, when it comes to attending school, when it comes to being a part of society, there's no record that they even exist. So we feel like it's probably closer to 300 million of them than 250 million of them, but it's still a huge, huge number.
It's extraordinary. And I suspect, again, please comment otherwise, but when you touched on the fact that they don't get education, or they're not able to get a driver's license or register, it sort of puts pay to when people say, oh no, it's all equal in a country. Everyone's allowed to vote. Everyone's allowed to do this. We've got these programs. That's all well and good. But if they can't access them, they don't know about them, or they don't have the right documentation, then that openness or that availability for, say, government jobs is really just not actually there in practice. And they're just born into this. That's the other thing, isn't it?
That's right.
They
And
are,
so
yeah.
even when we do educate people and say you actually have these rights, they still have to have the courage to go into the police station, or to go into the government office, or to go to whatever facility is, the hospital or whatever. And when you've been told from a really young age, don't go there, you'll be in trouble, don't touch that, don't do this, don't do that, then you've got to get beyond just understanding and knowing your rights. You've got to actually break through into their very level of confidence that they will have the courage to step out and embrace their rights. So it's just a really, really huge issue. And girls in India, in many places, are also told that they have less value than boys. So we also work very much with empowering women. So if you're a Dalit, that's kind of strike one. And then if you're a girl, it's strike two. And so very much, female infanticide is still practiced in some parts of India. And little girl Dalits, they're the ones who really are the ones that break our hearts. They're the ones that we really, really reach out to work with.
Well, not to traumatize viewers and listeners, talk us through, be it starting with the young girls. I mean, what does this practically look like day by day? They're untouchable, but what does that look like? Is it that people don't talk to them? Is it that people abuse them? I mean, I'm sure it's a full gamut, but yeah, what does that look like? How does it manifest in these people's lives day by day? And perhaps if you're comfortable, start with the little girls, because I already feel sort of it's going to be a tragic story.
It really is. It's a tragic story, but there's a lot of hope around it too, Simon. And that's what keeps us going. That's what gets us up in the morning. So these little girls from a very young age, they're told that they don't have value, they don't have worth. And so even if there is education available, it would be the little boys that would be prioritised to get any education that they can. The little girls would be looking after other babies or working in the field from a young age. And then because in the society, when you get married, you look after the boy's family. The boy looks after his family. So if a girl is going to get married, she won't be looking after her parents. She'll be looking after her in-laws. And so a lot of parents would think, well, that's just an extra mouth to feed. And there's really no investment in that because we live in poverty anyway. The little girl is going to get married, so we may as well just marry her off quite young. So there's a huge issue with child bride marriages, which are completely illegal in India. But again, it's quite common for this to happen. So we'll work with families and look at the drivers as to why the girls are being married at such an early age and try and work with the families to prevent that happening. Or if we hear that there's something like that happening, we'll bring in social workers and start working with that community. I think one of the things that really impacts us particularly is a practice called the Jogini practice, where some of these little girls get married to the temple goddess, and it happens for a variety of reasons, but the little girl doesn't know anything that's going to happen once she becomes a Jogini. All she knows is that on one particular day she's deemed to have no value, no worth. She's a little girl, she's a Dalit, she's worthless. Suddenly there's this whole ceremony that happens. She's put in a beautiful dress, flowers in her hair. She could be as young as 6 or 7 or up to sort of 9, 10, 11. The next day, she's told, "You're a Jogini." They put a necklace around her neck. And after that, everybody in the village knows she's been dedicated to the temple goddess. And basically, once she hits puberty, any man in the village can use her for sex, day or night. Every violation of her body is deemed a worship to the goddess. So there's no money that's really transferred. It's not like she's become a prostitute. She's just a sex slave in the village. And so this, for us, when we found out about this practice, was the most devastating part of what we do. But we've been working in this space now for a decade, and we're really starting to see the tide change, which is really exciting.
Well, let's talk about that work you lead, because I mean, even as you talk about the Jogini, is that how I say Jogini girls? I mean,
Yes.
that's just traumatizing to even think about it, if I could use that word, let alone, of course, these young girls experiencing this. And I was just struck by something you said of how they go from being delete, untouchable, unworthy, and all the abuse that comes with that. But then the next moment, yes, you're promoted into something which you don't, well, they don't fully comprehend. I mean, it's just, it's tragic. So we better switch from the god awful to the hope. And, you know, again, DFN, Dignity, Freedom Network. Tell us what you're doing to help. What does this look like day by day?
Yeah, and also you just touched on something interesting. So they're told they're untouchable. So we would say they're untouchable by day, but touchable by night, which is just absolutely appalling. So treated as dirt during the day and yet just used and abused during the night. So what we did was the Indian government have made this practice illegal since 1988, but that hasn't trickled down into the villages where the practice still occurs. And so if you talk to people in power, in government, etc., in India, they'll say, "We've dealt with this, we've made it illegal, the problem is solved." And we just applaud the Indian government for that and taking that step and those initiatives. But we brought in a team of lawyers. And so in 2015, we were able to have laws in place that meant that there was actually teeth in this area. And so we could go into the villages, connect with the police, connect with the village elders and say, "Did you know this practice has actually been illegal since 1988? Did you know there are actually laws to protect these women and girls? And did you know that we've got a massive people on our team and we are going to stand here and advocate for this practice to end?" And so we let these village elders, we let the police know that if there are cases in their villages where the dedications are happening or where the women are still enduring this kind of abuse, we will walk into the police station with them, we will prosecute, we will bring the power of the law to bear and protect these women and girls. And so then we connect with these women and we explain to them the practice is illegal. You don't have to say yes to these men. We are here. We have team here. Can we provide you with healthcare? Can we provide you with HIV and AIDS testing? Can we hold you? Can we pray with you? Can we counsel you? Can we walk this journey with you? And so we see these women leaving the practice, and when we meet them, often they're alcoholics, often they struggle with all sorts of substance abuse, depression, suicidal thoughts, etc. We walk this journey with them and we help them come out of the practice. And these women then become so angry about this lie that they've been told that this is what they were created for. They're the ones who join our team and they're the ones who advocate in their village for other women and girls and for the practice to end. And they're the ones who are the absolute champions. And this is what keeps us so excited, because we're building momentum of this grassroots, women-driven, led, empowered initiative that we believe will actually see this practice come to an end.
Well, there's something quite profound in that, as you say. My term here, but you've liberated a woman from a terrible, terrible situation. and then they go on to being actually exceptionally strong. If they're the ones then.
Absolutely. They're the champions.
So tell me,
Yeah.
are the police? I mean, this is general. I'm sure village by village, but are the police there constructive, or is it really case by case? Some law officials will be happy to work with you, others want to ignore it. Same with village elders.
Yes, very much so, particularly in the early days when they thought, there's just a small group of people here, we'll just basically blow them off, tell them to go away. We don't have to deal with this at all. But over time, when we haven't gone away, when our teams haven't left, when they have stayed, when they have advocated, and when they have really stood there firmly, we now see the practice coming to a complete end in the villages that we work in. So initially we were in one or two villages. That was a decade ago, and then 5 and 10 and 20. And we now have an active presence in 350 villages in this region. And so in the villages where we have an active presence, we're actually seeing the dedication stopping. We're seeing the word going out that this is a really bad practice, that it is wrong, that there will be people who push back. And even as we're starting our work in new villages, we're seeing the word going ahead of us that these people mean business and that this really is something that we can bring to an end. So we're really excited. We've done studies in the field with Melbourne University and some other institutions to identify the practice happens in around 80,000, I think there's about 80,000 Jogani women in around 3,000 villages. So hitting 350, we know that we're in more than 10% of the villages where it occurs. And so we feel like we're hitting that tipping point where we can see it really come to an end.
Well, that's that hope side, isn't it? Says me to you. I mean, obviously you're bringing hope to these women, but actually, as the word goes out and spreads, there's real hope it will stop actually because of the work you're leading. I assume though you get. I hope it's okay to ask this. You'd get some pretty aggressive pushback, I could imagine. I mean, these are sometimes quite deep traditions and deeply held. So I imagine looking after your own security and that of your team is quite important, as to the girls once they've left the temple.
I think one of the reasons why we first got involved, Simon, is we were there in India and we got invited to a team meeting. And so these women have been marginalized at every level, physically, socially. They've just been ostracized in their communities. The men use and abuse the women, and the women know that their husbands are sleeping with these women. And so they've had no sense of community. And so one of the things that we instigated right at the beginning was team meetings where we'd bring them together and they'd be able to start talking about their children and the joys of life and all of that kind of thing. Anyway, we got invited to one of these team meetings, which was pretty profound. And one by one, the women were sharing their stories with them of the day they were dedicated and then what their life was like and then how they came out. But in particular, we'll never forget this one lady said, well, team meeting time, I've had a successful month. There was a dedication that was going to happen. I went to the police. I heard about it. I went to the parents. I said, this needs to stop. I'm going to intervene. We will stop this dedication. The little girl is still at risk. We'll get her moved with the parents' permission. She'll grow up in the safe house and the shelter home that we have for the most at-risk girls. And we were able to get the girl out and the dedication didn't go ahead. And everybody clapped and cheered and they said, yes, this is why we do what we do. That little girl will not suffer. And then the lady said, and then at the end of the day, the men came and beat me up because I'd taken away their new plaything. And she pulled up the edge of her sari and the welts on her leg were just unbelievable. And we just felt so appalled to think that that's what these women do every day. It's not this glamorous kind of job. It's really putting their name out there, putting their head on the line of I'm going to see these little girls protected. I'm going to see this practice stop. And at that moment, we just thought we can't walk away from this. This is something that we want to invest in. And another story that's a really great story was I remember one of our ladies, Ventakama, she had also prevented a dedication going ahead. And at the end of the day, the men came and beat her up as well. Our team heard about it. Somebody contacted one of our team leaders. They came and got got her away from the situation. Her children witnessed the whole thing. They provided counselling and healthcare and all of this. And then they said to her, now we don't want you to go back to that village. You're at risk. We want you to stay here in the main city. We'll find you a job. We'll provide for you. We'll make sure you're safe. And she said, no, that's not going to happen. I know who I am in Christ. Those men have violated me, and I'm going to, if I don't go back, other women also will suffer. And she said, I'm going to go back and I'm going to demand an apology. And we were absolutely shocked and stunned, and how this illiterate woman had understood so much of what we share with her about her value and her worth, and what she's become, and how much God loves her. Anyway, she went back and our team went with her, but she was at the forefront of the whole thing, and she stood there and she addressed these men. She dressed them down and she said, don't you dare ever. This is who I am. This is my value. This is my worth. You apologize to me. You apologize to my kids for what they've seen. And these men, so sheepishly, one by one, they just kind of hung their heads. And it's people like Venta Karma and her courage and her poise that are the ones who are the absolute champions. They're the ones that inspire us, and they're the ones who we just hold in the highest esteem.
I mean, two remarkable stories amongst hundreds that you're involved with, and it struck me as I was listening. It's sort of that paradox that here are the people treated like dirt, and yet are so powerful. Actually, through that sort of, if you will, liberating work that you've led. But again, I can see the great threat that your work is to those who hold that practice dear or benefit from it, particularly the men. So as you've just touched on, the fact that you have teams and safe houses and so forth, and I just sort of want to stress that for listeners and viewers to understand that this is not easy work, and that there's a cost. Tell us about the wider then work with the deletes, because obviously you're focused on the Jogani girls and what's happening there. But what does the mission or the work look like to the wider delete or untouchable community?
Yep, great question. So we feel like there's, 3 or 4 main pillars that a society needs to be a healthy society. So education, healthcare, economic empowerment and skills training, and then advocacy and having the law on your side. So that with those 4 things in place, you can really work with a good social structure in a society. So people often ask how this work actually began, and it was in the early 2000s where a whole lot of appalling things happened to some Dalit people, and I won't unpack that at the moment. I'm very happy to share about that at another time if people want to contact me or ask the questions. But Dalits had suffered and struggled for thousands of years in their society, but 2 words changed everything in the early 2000s, and the 2 words were social media. So before that, what happened in the village stayed in the village. But when these terrible things happened, suddenly they were out there on social media and they went viral, and the world started to notice and say, what's going on? This is terrible. We didn't know about this, with Gandhi and all. Everybody thought untouchability had come to an end, and they didn't realize that in remote areas and regional areas, it was all still being practiced. So suddenly the world sat up and took notice. So the organization that we'd been involved with, the leader of that, it was a mission organization in India, and they came alongside the Dalit leaders and they said to them, we want to empower you, we're just appalled by what's happened. How do we help you and support you in moving out of this slavery paradigm? And the leaders of the Dalit people said, we already believe that we're worthless. We believe we were created to be slaves. We believe that there is no value in us at all, but our kids don't yet believe that. So would you take our children? Would you give them education? Would you give them English medium education with a Christian worldview, where you tell them that everybody is created in God's image, right back from Genesis? So would you tell them that everybody is created equal, man, woman, etc.? And so the leaders of the organization took that as a mandate from these people, and they said this is what they want. So we started our first schools in the early 2000s, and we now have over 90 schools across India for Dalit children and other backward caste children, for Muslims, for tribals, for anybody who falls outside the caste system. they're welcome at our schools where they get a quality English-based education. And then we're just seeing these generations of kids growing up. The schools have health workers attached to them, and the kids get exposed to the arts. It's not just about academics, it's about a whole person. And so we're seeing these kids graduating. And as I said before, there's provision that has been made for Dalits to go to university, for them to get government jobs. And we're just taking that on board and saying, great, we'll work with the Indian government and we will raise up a generation of kids who know who they are, who understand their inherent value and worth, and who are trained, skilled, and equipped to move into these positions. And so we're seeing them going on to degrees, to masters, and a couple of them have even gone on to get PhDs. And so it's just really inspiring. Not all of these, separating this out from the Jogini practice, all Joginis are Dalits, but not all Dalits are Joginis. These Dalits are going on and breaking glass ceilings, and we're just going to see an incredible move happening, I think, as these kids go on to excel in their field of study.
Well, says me to you, who's on the front line, it's almost sort of the breach in the dam. You know, as you break, we'll create that little hole, and as more and more people actually get educated from the delete class, for one of a, that's probably the wrong term, but the deletes go and get educated, move in to societal acceptance, it's going to make it easier for more and more. So, I mean, incredibly life changing. Final question before, obviously, tell us how people can support you is, where did the notion of Dignity Freedom Network come from? I mean, there's a strong hint in what you're sharing about the dignity of every person and so forth. But yeah, where did the name DFN come from?
So I think we just believe, going back to the book of Genesis, where we talk about everybody being created with dignity and with worth. And it's just the absolute paramount foundation. And again, here in New Zealand, we do have that understanding, whether we're Christians or not, of the Judeo-Christian worldview that says that everybody has dignity, that everybody has worth, that everybody has value. And of course, we then need to pursue what that looks like in our lives, in our families, and in our communities. But breaking that slave mentality, that slave understanding of these people and seeing them move into freedom. And the word network, well, it's a very grassroots driven and led organization. And so it really is a network of people on the ground. But Simon, I also just wanted to touch on the health and economic empowerment side quickly as well. So
No,
the
please
education's
take your
great
time.
for the next generation, but people again here in New Zealand, I don't think we understand how good we have it with our healthcare system. And I know that we can do better. And I know that there's some stories that we all have and people that we know. But in India, it's very difficult if you're a Dalit to access robust healthcare. And I think we particularly saw this during the COVID pandemic that we've all experienced, where um, when you're marginalized, when you're uneducated, and when you don't have access to preventative care, it can really take it to a whole other level. So one of the good things that came out of COVID was moving into telehealth. So we have 8 regional clinics around the country where we provide healthcare for those who can't access it, who can't afford it. But with the introduction of telehealth, it's again really augmented what we already had on the ground. So we have around 160 community health workers that are trained for about a 1.5, 2 year nursing kind of a standard. So not as high as a New Zealand nurse, but certainly a lot more than what was in the villages before that. But when they connect to telehealth and we connect them to doctors in Hyderabad, and when we connect them to doctors, actually even we can do that here in New Zealand as well, where they can get involved through telehealth and working with these communities. It means that the community health workers in the villages can provide a far greater level of healthcare for the people. And again, all of this is all messaged with the fact of, there's a God who cares for you. We're providing this for you because people care, because you have value, because you have worth. And we're seeing many people coming to a place of understanding what that means and understanding the significance of knowing who they are in Christ. So that's also been really great. And then the economic empowerment. Of course, one of the things we love to do is send funds to India for these programs. But when we can raise up people in their own community who can have jobs, who can get employment. It not only makes sustainability possible in the country, but it also means that it multiplies the effectiveness of the work. And it also means that the people we're working with don't rely on handouts, but again, it's restoring their dignity where they know they've got a job to go to during the day, whether it's tailoring, whether it's joining one of our courses in healthcare, hygiene assistance, etc. And then they can actually provide for their children, and they've got that dignity of earned success themselves, where they know that they are able to not just rely on the good heartedness of other people, but also step into that place of knowing that they have gainful employment. And so it's all of those coming together that's really shaping the work on the ground and really shaping the impact of what's happening in the lives of these people. So that's
Oh,
just something
look,
I wanted to throw in there.
no, please do. Look, I think it's quite inspiring. In fact, it's not just quite inspiring. It really is, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on and share the work you do. I do somewhat tongue in cheek wonder if you and your volunteers and supporters ever sleep when you're addressing all these elements. And I suppose too, like you've touched on the health, you've touched on the economic side, but everything you've described as well, you're affecting their emotional health, their mental health, their social, spiritual health. All of that is accompanied because that's that starting point. It's dignity that each and every one of us, well, certainly out of the Judeo-Christian perspective, is made in the image of God. And so we all have this inherent dignity. And I just think, again, it's inspiring what you're leading. So how do people help? What do you need? Money is always going to be one of them, but what are some of the things that people could do listening if they want to help and support you, and how do they get in contact?
Great questions. Well, we really want to grow the work in New Zealand. We have a prayer initiative. We love people to come along and pray with us. So every month we have monthly Zoom meetings. So 1 hour a month, you can join that. We'd love you to come along. We have 3 on the ground prayer meetings that happen, one in Wellington, one in Tauranga, and one in Hamilton. So contact us. We'd love to see more little prayer cells start all around the country. We'd love to have little groups of people praying all through the month, or as I say, join our Zoom prayer meeting. We send a monthly prayer update out as well, so you can get that straight to your inbox and be praying deliberately and intentionally for the work. We love money. We're constantly hearing, we have schools in the Jogani area, and we love to see these children coming to school. So you can sponsor kids in our schools, but we also bus kids who are most at risk in their communities into other areas where they can attend school with anonymity and people don't know what backgrounds they come from. Each bus costs around $50,000, and we're desperately in need of 6 new buses at the moment. We've got kids
Six.
dropping out of
Oof.
school. We need 6 new buses at the moment. So if that's something that people are interested in, there's infrastructure in the schools. And then we love to take people to see the work as well. So we've got a trip coming up in November, 1 week, going to visit the schools, visit the health work, visit the economic empowerment programs, meeting the staff, seeing the teams, seeing the difference that's being made. They're only small teams, but we've still got a few spots left. If people would love to come across to India, see the work themselves, get inspired. We love volunteers. We love people to become what we call church champions, where they become the voice of DFN in their church family, their church community. We love to speak in churches. We love to get schools behind this. We've had a bunch of schools in New Zealand recognise the importance of getting all of this kind of stuff, the less explicit stuff, on the kids' radars, and getting them involved too. And that message is number one, life is actually pretty good here in New Zealand. Number two, kids around the world don't have it quite as good as us. Number three, God's heart for justice. And number four, I can make a difference. And so schools love embracing that kind of initiative as well, and getting the kids on board with that. And then we have an intern program for girls between 17 and 23 years, where you can join a mentoring kind of a program, 1 hour a month, and a bit of a Bible study thrown in with that on God's heart for justice. So lots of ways to get involved, lots of ways that people can hear about us, spread the word, and connect with us.
Well, no excuses. There's so many options that, yeah, there's no excuse for someone not to help. So how do they best contact you, Kate, or do they connect to DFN? What's like your website and so forth that people could go to?
Yep, so our website is just dfn.org.nz. dfn.org.nz, or you can email info@dfn.org.nz. You can find us on Facebook and send us messages that way. Dignity Freedom Network New Zealand. Follow us on Instagram. But yes, the website and the email address are the main ways to get in touch with us.
Kate, thank you so much for sharing what's at one moment is a tragic and an awful situation that, women and men, young children are still suffering through, but also the inspiration that you're providing through the work. So thank you for coming on to the podcast and talking us through all of this, and just encourage viewers to get in touch. If this has moved or inspired you, get in touch with Kate and the team there at DFN. And again, Kate, wish you really, really well for the continued mission and efforts.
Thanks so much, Simon. Our key verse is Proverbs 31:8 and 9, which talks about being a voice for those who have no voice. So you've given me a platform for that today, and I thank you so much for that.